Have you ever heard someone speak without hearing them speak? I mean, have you ever fully understood someone who could not articulate their thoughts in the way you expected, yet their mind, their body, their rhythm made their meaning unmistakably clear? This is what that sounds like. What you just heard was my brother humming happily on his own accord one afternoon. He doesn't sing with words, but he hums melodies, and we learn that he hums when he's happy or regulating. He hums often, sometimes even beatboxes. This is how he speaks. My younger brother, Muhammad, was diagnosed with autism at the age of 3 in 2005. At the time, the medical field was still refining its understanding of autism, and my family was still refining our understanding of English. As a family of immigrants and first-generation Algerian Americans, we had to learn language through school systems and everyday life, but when language was the barrier, and I mean language as we know it, did not fully exist, we had to look deeper than vocal cords. My brother is non-speaking, and at the time, doctors focused on what was missing. Speech was delayed, attention drifted, and eye contact did not follow conventional patterns. What was harder to name, and therefore easier to overlook, was what was present. During my brother's early adolescent years, something began to unravel. He would cry more often than a young child would, sometimes uncontrollably. He would cry for long stretches of time, sometimes yelling in ways that sounded like he was trying to push words through a door that would not open. We didn't understand what was happening, and neither did the doctors. With no clear answers, the work of understanding him moved back to where it had always begun, at home. We began to listen more carefully for patterns, for changes in his behavior, for the rhythms of his day. Mama noticed something subtle but consistent. His meltdowns would happen after eating certain foods, and within minutes of digestion, his body and mood shifted. The crying would begin, and after some time, it would slowly pass. Eventually, we discovered the cause: gluten sensitivity, something that affects a significant number of autistic individuals. The pain he felt in his body was something he couldn't explain in words, but had been communicating it the only way he knew how: through his body. Muha, what we call him at home, has always communicated with us, not through full sentences or long explanations, but through emotions, expressions, and behavior. As he grew, it became clear that the absence of conventional speech did not mean the absence of intelligence. It meant that the framework we were using to define communication was too narrow. Even without speech, Muha has always shown us his understanding of the world around him. If you ask Muha, who's handsome, he would give you a smirk and pat his chest. He really does that, meaning me. If he wants to go outside, he would put on his jacket, bring his shoes over to us so we can tie his laces and put his hood on. That signaled it's time to go outside, no matter the weather, even in our favorite cold New England temperatures. On mornings, when Muha's school bus is late, he would bring the phone over to Mama, and that was his way of telling her it's time to check in on the bus. He does this because he's seen her do it before. This is learning through observations, repetition, and patterns, something we all know how to do. None of these moments requires spoken language, but every one of them requires comprehension. But what happens when someone understands the world deeply yet communicates differently? Too often, our institutions answer that question by treating that person as less capable. Not because intelligence is missing, but because the system was never designed to fully recognize it. Airports, for example, are built for efficiency and movement, not sensory regulation. The crowds, the announcements, the lights, the noise, it's overwhelming even for neurotypical travelers. When going on a family trip, my brother had a sudden burst of energy at the terminal where we were awaiting our flight, running excitedly from one end to the next. Airport workers asked Muha not to run in a certain part of the terminal without knowing he was non-speaking. Muha gave them a stare, as he normally would, and kept it pushing. We had to explain to the workers that he needed the space in order to stay calm. In that moment, I realized that airports were never designed with him in mind. In fact, only 32 airports in the United States out of the 19,000 airports we have in this country have designated quiet spaces. And of those, only 14 contain specialized sensory rooms designed for neurodivergent travelers. To the outside world, my brother's burst of energy in a space made for travel could have been seen as incompetence, when in fact, he's just communicating to us that he's overwhelmed in a space that is not well suited for him. To his family, Muha's communication is unmistakable. Outside, it is often misunderstood, and he isn't alone. Between 25 and 30% of autistic individuals are minimally speaking or non-speaking. Studies on augmentative and alternative communication show that when non-speaking individuals are given access to tools such as typing interfaces, eye-gaze systems, and structured visual supports, many demonstrate cognitive abilities that were previously underestimated. What changes in these cases is not intelligence. What changes is access. This led me to look beyond Western assumptions about communication. Among the Yoruba people of West Africa, talking drums replicate the tonal structure of language so precisely that messages can travel across villages through rhythm alone. A skilled drummer can communicate proverbs, warnings, praise poetry, and historical narratives through patterns of sound. The drum does not simply accompany language. The drum is language. Disability scholars describe something called a double empathy problem, which suggests that communication breakdown between autistic and non-autistic individuals arises not from a deficit on one side, but from a mismatch between two systems of understanding. That insight shifted something in me. It meant that the responsibility was not solely on my brother to understand dominant communication norms. It was also on us, educators, clinicians, families, and institutions to expand ours. My brother graduated from high school in 2024 in his own way. His communication looked like sitting excitedly while being handed snacks by his teacher, who sat with him the whole way through to keep him engaged. His communication looked like his eyes scanning for exits and his body mapping escape routes before the noise can swallow him whole. His communication looked like handing the diploma right back into the hands of his teacher, showing disregard for the certificate and all the regards for seeking a quiet space. Typical Muha fashion. So I return to the question I began with. Have you ever heard someone speak without hearing them speak? If you have, then you already understand that communication is far greater than language. And if you have not, then I invite you to reconsider what you have been trained to understand. If we learn to listen with the same depth we demand people speak, we wouldn't just change outcomes for non-speaking autistic people. It means noticing when somebody's body shifts in discomfort before they can explain why. It means understanding that silence can hold concentration or thought rather than absence. With this approach, we would fundamentally change how we define communication, whose voices matter, and what it truly means to be heard. My brother has never had a conventional conversation with me, yet he has reshaped how I understand people. He taught me that listening is not waiting for words, but rather the willingness to understand meaning where we were not trained to look for it. Perhaps the question was never whether or not he could speak. Perhaps the question has always been whether or not we are willing to listen. Thank you.